Hello, my name's Adrienne and I am one of the careers advisors at UEA Careers Central. I'm going to run through a quick supplementary presentation to just explain a little bit more the idea of an everything CV. Before I go on to talk about the everything CV, I just want to run through the principles of a good CV. Now, if any of the content that I cover in the next 15 minutes or so is new to you, then we really strongly recommend that you attend the full CV workshop, which is part of the how-to schedule. A good CV is relevant, it's tailored to a particular role, to a particular organisation. It provides evidence, and that evidence is provided through examples and outcomes, so the impact of what you did and how you did it. A good CV is up to date and it's structured in a way that makes the most of your skills and experience. So it's different having an everything CV because an everything CV is not a specific tailored example. It is something that is your document. It contains a full list of all that you've done, a full list of evidence statements. It doesn't have to look pretty. Nobody else is going to see this. This is your document, and it doesn't need to stick to the under 2-page rule. So it's your record of everything that you've achieved and is therefore your resource from which to build relevant targeted CVs. And just a reminder, the key sections of a CV are typically a profile, which is again tailored, talking about who you are, what you can do, and what you want to do in relation to the job to which you're applying. You may have a skills summary that again is there to match to the key requirements of the role. But you'll have sections that are pretty standard: education, work experience, volunteering, uni activities. For academic CVs, publications and conferences or posters or anything that you've contributed through your academic work, as well as professional and personal development. So perhaps you are on the UEA award or you have been doing some courses through LinkedIn Learning, so showing your commitment to ongoing learning. And then interests and achievements. Obviously, this sits within the wider CV framework in terms of your contact details and references available on request and things like this. But these are the key sections that can be tailored in a CV. Okay, so beginning to speak about the idea of an everything CV. Really, a CV is there to, as I say, give that evidence, give those examples. And so the first stage of creating an everything CV is unpacking experience and then using what we call the CARL framework: context, action, result, and learning. So by unpacking, I mean telling the whole story to yourself in detail, breaking down the different sections of your experience. So perhaps talking about a part-time job that you've had, not just saying, I had a part-time job and I did customer service, but actually sitting down and thinking, okay, what did I do on a daily basis? What kind of work did I work on? Who did I work for? And then when I've got that list explaining what I did, extracting from that how you did it. So, for example, with providing customer service, did it mean that you had to listen? Did it mean that you had to communicate? Did it mean that you had to negotiate with people? Did it mean that you had to work in a high pressured environment? So you're beginning to give a bit more detail about how you provided good customer service. And then you can go through the process of creating bullet points using context, action, result, and learning. So the context, as I say, is, for example, working in a busy restaurant. The action is a series of bullet points that explain how you were able to manage multiple clients, where you were able to use clear communication, that you were able to work collaboratively in a team and step in to support other members of the team in busy periods, or whatever it is. So you've unpacked that story, you're then beginning to break it down. And the result can be various things. It could be a hard outcome, so to speak. So positive feedback from customers or managers, or promotion. But it also could be, learning how to communicate clearly in a stressful environment, for example. It's a very off-the-cuff example, but what changed as a result? What was the outcome? And you can also talk about what you learned about yourself, and often more common in interviews, linking that very clearly to the role itself, so that you know that this particular skill that's gained from this particular experience is going to be particularly useful in the role for which you're applying. So this is Carl, and if you're not familiar with Carl, then please be reassured that there's lots of information on the site about Carl to help you to really get to grips with it, but there's a bit more coming up in a moment. So you're building your Everything CV, and so how do you begin to use your Everything CV to approach different sections and expand to their fullest potential? So education, really good example, because often we see CVs that just give your degree title and dates and degree classification or current grades. It doesn't tell me anything about what's going on inside your degree, which is 3 rather significant years of your life. So we really need to know about this. So you could talk about your modules, projects, research or dissertation, skills and knowledge, maybe specific skills like lab skills or software, or your grades. So an Everything CV could contain all of this information, but it's then up to you to select which is the most relevant to the role for each CV that you're writing. So to expand this example a little bit, how might you change the education sector depending on what you're tailoring to? So for example, if you're applying for a master's application, you might want to talk about perhaps undertaking a research methods module, or maybe it's a research related role, and so you could expand a little bit about the fact that you've learned more about quantitative and qualitative research methodologies. Perhaps projects are going to be important, and it's clear in the job that you're applying to that you're going to need some kind of project management skills. Or it may be about teamwork, and a project that you've undertaken at university is a very good example of where you've worked very collaboratively to a deadline, and so you could talk a little bit about that project. By using your research or your dissertation, it's a way of illustrating that you've got the ability to research independently and effectively, or work on an extended piece of writing. Useful if that's relevant to the role for which you're applying. Skills can really take a range of examples. So you could be talking about very specific knowledge that comes from your degree. So perhaps you've done some training in health and safety, particularly if you've got lab experience, so you know how to operate safely in a lab environment. It may be that you're doing social work and you've gained some understanding of legislation related to child protection, for example. You may have models that you've been using, and that may be around, for example, quantitative data. So things that actually hard skills, knowledge and experience that relate specifically for your to your discipline. Allied health professionals, you may have particular areas of practice that have been developed through your placements. So something that really directly applies to the role to which you're applying. However, you've also gained transferable or translatable skills in your education. So working in a team, presenting, report writing, utilising different forms of media. It depends on your degree. It depends on what you're studying. But there are skills there that you are developing day in, day out as part of your degree. So you need to talk about them if that's what the employer is asking for. And then, of course, there's very specific technical skills, using equipment, following processes, using particular software, etc., and your grades. So if you are, for example, again, let's go back to the master's application, you are applying to a master's and you've got your first class grades and it's looking really strong, then you're going to really want to kind of emphasize that, that the module grades that may be specific as well to that master's are at a really strong level. So you know that you've got your 2-1 or your first, and that's looking good. Or you're foregrounding particular grades because you think they show an aptitude. Okay, so that's thinking about your education. And actually, as I say, lots of people just kind of discount their education. It's like, oh, I'm spending 3 years doing a BA, and then you don't tell the employer anything about why that matters. And for graduate employers who want graduates, then helping them to understand what you've gained from that degree is super important. Then we come to all of the kind of key sections of your CV that involve you either working, volunteering, your involvement in societies, all of those activities that are critical to help you evidence the skills that are needed for a particular role. So here's an example, and this goes back to this idea of telling yourself the story. So if I was, talking myself through this story, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to talk about my committee experience when I did the Emma Jonathan Fund event. So what did I do? Well, okay, I was responsible for the planning. What did that mean? Okay, I had to liaise. I had to liaise with the venue. I had to talk to them about the arrangements we needed. I had to talk to them about catering options and figure out what the costs were going to be and actually get the cost right for the event. I did loads of liaising with marketing, with the committee. I coordinated the students that I needed to set up the exhibition space, so we did that one day. I worked on the project overall, so I had to kind of work with the rest of the committee to make sure we were running to time. And I kept all of those records around ticket sales, and I used Excel for that. Okay, and I needed, when talking about the project management, I did use a Gantt chart, which is a really good project management tool. So I learned how to do that, and I used that for the fundraiser. We did loads of meetings, keeping kind of lines of communication open, and making sure that everything that came up got dealt with. Right, okay, on the night itself, I managed the team of volunteers. I did that health and safety briefing so that everybody knew how they needed to behave and also what their responsibilities were and the space that they were working in. And that meant that everybody was, safe, but also very well looked after on the night itself. And we raised £3,500. That was brilliant. And my big learning, what would I say at the moment? That's probably around project management. I learned loads of things around project management. So that's me talking to myself, bringing out that story. That's my telling. And you can tell that story to yourself in whatever way. But the bottom line is to really unpack everything and think about the day-to-day, the processes, the activities, so that you're capturing all of it. And as you can see at the bottom, the space there really already in this example to use it to evidence project planning, negotiation, problem solving, organisational skills, resilience. So lots of things could be gained from expanding and tailoring this particular example. And what you might do if you do this kind of writing it out in full is then to go through and highlight the skills and the specific evidence that actually might be useful. So we've got the Gantt chart here, we've got using Excel, but we've also got liaison, event planning, keeping track, managing a team. So it's bringing out this idea of, the evidence that you are going to be providing in your CV. And then using Carl and leading with the actions that you've taken, you can then end up with a very long list of bullet points that pull everything out that you need to of this particular experience. It's a long list. It's too long. So you then need to ask yourself, okay, what might I use when I'm tailoring my master CV or my everything CV to a particular role? So if you were applying for a role that actually needed somebody to have some experience of overseeing a project and keeping track of activities, then you may focus on the project management tools, using Gantt charts, using Excel, making sure that there was regular liaison and updating with the team. If it's something that is perhaps working with volunteers, you might talk about managing and training up that team of volunteers and and all of the coordination work involved, and perhaps something around, customer service and making sure that the event ran smoothly and your team really kind of achieved everything they set out to achieve. So you can see that you can pick out different things depending on what the employer is asking for. But you've got all of it. So once it's written, and it becomes your resource to draw from. So if you're going to build your everything CV, then you're applying this approach to all aspects of your CV and you're adding new experiences as you go along. The next thing to do is to create templates to set out the information that doesn't change, and I'll talk about this in a moment. It is worth bearing in mind that CVs can be formatted in different ways. The three key ways are listed here. So you've got the standard chronological, which, like all CVs, is in reverse chronological order. So the most recent activity comes top. And that tends to lead with your education, followed by your employment. But there's also something called a relevant CV. So that is where you give yourself a relevant experience heading, and perhaps you pull things from volunteering, from societies, from work experience, maybe a module that you studied, and you pull all of those things in reverse chronological order under a relevant experience section. And that means that you can really focus in on what the employer is interested in. So an example of that might be you're really interested in working in publishing. You've done some editing on Concrete, you've done the publishing module in your second year, you've done some work with Eggbox, which is the publishing society, and you've maybe done a little bit with the Creative Writing Society, and you did a little bit of work experience working for a writer. All of those things would sit normally in different sections of your CV. But if you want to really evidence that you've got some experience of the different elements going into publishing, then you might bring all of those things together under a relevant CV heading. And a skills CV is similar in the sense that you are leading with a list of evidence skills, but you're tailoring those skills depending on what the employer is asking for in that particular application. And this is where, it's key. You have got an outline of a CV. This is what will become your template without the red. And so you've got a blank space for your personal profile. You've got bullet points, but empty bullet points for your skills, and you're adapting that skill statement to suit the role requirements. So what is it the employer is asking for in that particular person specification? And by doing that, you can begin to build a library of skill statements that you can use depending on that person's spec. And you can use Carl to actually give examples rather than just listing communication skills, team working skills, etc., but actually coming up with an example to evidence where you've developed those skills. And then for each section, you've basically got the title of the role and the dates and the one line kind of this is what I was doing, and the bullet points are then the things that you sweep in from your everything CV, and you choose the bullet points that are most relevant to that role. So taking all of those extra bullet points out that I put in, what you're left with is this skeleton of a CV. It's got no content in it in terms of the evidence, the examples, but it is a template, and it's ready then to be saved as a template. And to do that, you simply, rather than save as a Word document, you go down the drop-down box and you save it as a Word template. What does this mean? It means that every time you open that document, it will create a new version for you. So you can have your everything CV open, and you can open a new template, and you have your job description and person spec, and you literally copy across the relevant bullet points to make sure that this is a very tailored CV. You can then save that particular CV, UEA Ambassador CV, Joe Blogs, and then the next time you open that Word template, it will create a new one of these. So every time it's generating a blank but pre-populated document. So you don't have to start from scratch in terms of writing out the CV, but at the same time, you don't have to tailor an existing CV. You've got an empty palette there for you to tailor. And as I say at the bottom there, you could save more than one version using the different layouts. So you could have a template that is a relevant experience template. So you're changing the heading here, and you're maybe putting relevant experience here. Or you could have a skills template. It's up to you. But it's definitely worth looking at some of the different examples on Career Hub, and deciding what kinds of format you like, and then perhaps saving some of those as templates. So once you have your Everything CV, and you've created your templates, then make sure you update your Everything CV on a regular basis. You do need to update your template if you add a new section in. So what you would need to do is open the template, add in your new section headers, and then save it as template 2. And then you can delete your first template. So you will need to kind of update your template so that every time you're opening it, you're not having to add in that new information. It's already there. And keep updating your skills summary, keep updating examples of how you write about your skills as a sort of section on your Everything CV to save you from having to write everything from scratch. So what you might want to do is come along to the full CV and application workshop. Maybe I'm talking about things here that you're still not totally clear about because you haven't been to that workshop. You might want to view the resources on my CC. There's lots and lots of information about CVs on the website. Would you have a go at creating an Everything CV template and practice using Word templates if it's not something that you've done before? Do you want to revisit perhaps old CVs and start using those to work on your Everything CV? And a reminder that you can always ask us for CV review, and we particularly welcome CVs with a linked job title and job description and person specification, so we can actually comment on how well you've tailored your CV to that particular job. Bear in mind that the CV is quite often the first piece of work an employer ever sees from you. Most commonly, that's how an employer first encounters you. So to make a CV that is really clearly tailored, is speaking to that particular job and that particular employer, is basically overcoming one of the biggest complaints employers have about CVs. They're always telling us that they're not tailored and they don't have relevant information in them. It's not the right CV. So we'd encourage you to think about, even if you don't want to set up an Everything CV, we'd encourage you to think about, how you actually begin to tailor your CV and really speak to the applications that you're making. More information, if you have a look on my CC, you will see the resources section. Click on that and that will take you to the screen on the right hand side here, and have a look at apply for jobs. That takes you through to all of our CV resources. So a brief addendum, really, an introduction to the idea of an Everything CV. I hope that it's useful and I hope that you have fun building your Everything CV. Thanks very much for listening.